On this episode of Town Square Talk, we have Joe Tromiczak from Bircher Hill Pottery. This show is supported by South Robert Street Business Association and by West St. Paul and Mendota Heights Rotary Club. Welcome to Town Square Talk. I'm your host, Caleb Worth. Today we have founder, artisan, potter, Joe Tromiczak from Bircher Hill Pottery. Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I would like to get to know you here a little bit at the top. Can you tell me a little bit about your early life and your education?
Early life. I grew up in South Minneapolis in a very nice neighborhood. I was the youngest of 5 kids. And each one of us had a little covey of friends. So we knew kids from ages of being young to high school. So it was really nice. So we had this really nice neighborhood of family, friends, and activities. I grew up playing sports a lot, you know, from the time that I could get up in the morning till the time I could go back to sleep at night, thinking about that next day of what we would be doing. And the other thing that probably was an influence on why I became an artisan was my dad was a traveling salesman. And he had a business with women's sportswear. And so he had these cardboard boxes. And I would take those cardboard boxes when they were empty and I'd start configuring things. I started making a town at one point with theaters and everything else and a drugstore, just like our neighborhood.
Did you have a name for this town?
No, it was just my cardboard town.
Okay, got it.
And then working and playing with my friends, we had sandboxes. And we would spend hours configuring towns and cities. And a lot of it was probably on the line of post-World War II activities. So we'd be making these towns and we'd have all these little plastic soldiers that we'd be playing with. So that, I guess I would say that probably spurred on my imagination and creativity.
Sure.
Always keeping myself active. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll get the creative juices flowing.
Yeah. And then you let that cross over into winter when you start making your snow forts. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Joe, can you tell me what really sparked your interest in pottery? How did you end up getting into that line of work?
You know, I went to college on a soccer scholarship in Illinois and wasn't too sure what I was going to major in or what I wanted to do other than play sports, actually. So I thought, well, I loved my dreams. And I thought, I'll become a psychologist. And my roommate, my first year, it was a Saturday morning, raining. We didn't know what we were going to do. He says, hey, let's go down into the art building. Okay. Get there, and he said, I'm taking a class in ceramics. So he said, you want to try it? I was like, well, sure. So he gave me a 2-pound ball of clay, which is about the size of a softball, and put me on the wheel and kind of showed me a few things. Well, by the time I was done with that ball of clay, I had a little disc that was about 4.5 inches in diameter and a little handle on the top. So he cuts it off. We get done. 3 weeks later, he comes back into the room and he hands me this disc with this little handle on it. And I looked at it and I said, well, what's this? And he said, well, that's the piece you threw the other day. And it was like, you got to be kidding me. And I have it right here.
Look at that. There it is.
I've got it under glass right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It was one of those things that time and space were fused into one. And I loved just being on there and finding out what could be done with this malleable piece of clay.
Right.
So that next semester I took ceramics and it was history after that.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
All at the suggestion
That's right. That's what you do on a Saturday morning when it's
let's
raining.
do this on a Saturday. Let's do pottery. I like it.
Yeah.
Nice. That is great.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell me a little bit more about, you were just kind of describing that first
Yeah.
piece you made, but other, I guess, notable, future pieces that were after this that you want to describe for us?
Well, the nice thing is that it was a small college, so there really weren't that many students there. And my roommate, he was there for clay, and he had taken classes in high school. I had never taken any art classes. I went to a school that the only thing they had was mechanical drawing, and I really wasn't interested in that at that point. So when I did get out of high school, I spent a year and a half working at General Mills and at Donaldson's, which was a clothing store. And then I took classes at the University of Minnesota. So I took some drawing classes and never took any clay. But then when I got into college in Illinois, that's when I really caught on to doing that. And I changed my major, and I became a fine arts major. So I majored in ceramics and minored in photography.
Oh, okay.
And as far as the pieces, my friend that got me there that first day, he and I were the two lab assistants for 3 years together. So we'd make clay, we'd help out students when the teachers weren't around, when the professors weren't around. And then we had this little competition of, all right, hey, let's see if we can do this. Or let's see if we can make one, who can make the tallest piece out of this amount of clay. So we had this little competition going on, and that really helped out. And then our professor was really hands-on. And the nice thing is that he was so proficient in making pieces, hand-built or on the wheel. And I just, there being on the wheel, I love making things on the wheel. So one thing that I learned, and he said, don't fall in love with your pieces until you've got them home on the shelf. Because there are so many processes where something can go wrong. And there are some things that are happy accidents. But there are some things that are like, how the heck did that happen? And you don't have it. It can crack in various stages when it's still in the greenware state. So that's a perfectly dry piece, but it's so brittle. Or when you get it into the first firing, which is called the bisque firing. And that one brings them to the temperature where they will get glazes to adhere to them. But if you put them in too soon, when they're not bone dry, they can explode at a certain point, right around 400 to 500 degrees. And so you can have these minor accidents all along the way. So, yeah. So it's one of those things where it's have your sights set on the finished product, but at the same time, don't be married to it. It's all a process.
Right.
And it's more I call it being present to the creative muse.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So since you were kind of just talking about some of the process steps involved, can you describe for me sort of the typical A to Z process for making a piece of pottery?
Sure, A to Z. Let's do it the simplified way, which is you buy clay at a store that makes the clay. They'll get the different ingredients and put the clay together. So then you have to take that clay, you've got to get it to the point of where you've got all the air bubbles out. So that's a process called kneading. You get that done, and then you'll go ahead and, depending on what you're going to be making, if you're going to be making it on the wheel, if you're going to be making it on a table and coiling, rolling out a coil or a slab, we'll stick with the wheel for right now. The best thing to do is to make sure have a pretty good idea of what the parameters are of your clay, how big a piece you can make, what do I want to make with that? Are you making something that's strictly artistic? Are you making something that's going to be utilitarian? Or are you just trying to figure out how to get that to center? So, you go through the centering process, which takes a while because it's not just eye-hand coordination, it's also the feel. And a lot of times, people, when they're learning how to center, you can blindfold them because it's such a tactile thing to do.
And can you describe a little bit what you mean by centering?
By centering, you'll take that piece of clay, if you throw it close to the middle, you start the wheel turning, and it'll be wobbly. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to get that whole thing so it's symmetrical and it's even and it's not moving, it's not wobbling one way or another. Because at that point, you're opening it up from the middle, pulling out, and then pulling up.
Got it.
So once you get that done, you get your piece. Then you've got to make sure you can get it off the wheel. So there are various techniques of doing that.
Sure.
And then you want to dry it slowly. Because there may be a time when it's not just a cylinder that you're done with it once and done. It may be a bowl where you have extra clay at the bottom to support it when it's in that malleable state, especially when you're throwing with water. That's what you use to lubricate it. And that water is on the surface, but some of it goes into the clay as well, and that'll make it more malleable. So I'm trying to think you think of I just thought, think of a marshmallow. You push a marshmallow in. Well, then once you put it on a flame, it's not the same. You know, it's like that's where the heat and the water do the same thing. It just makes it more viscous. So once that's done, you've got it dried. You put it into a kiln, and it has to be fired up to a certain temperature to be a bisqueware. And what that does is it takes out all the water, and it also hardens it, but it still makes it to the point of it will absorb moisture. So you couldn't take that and, if you made a pitcher, for example, or a vessel to drink with, if you poured water in it, eventually you'd see that it would be starting to leak out because it would saturate the sides and then just start to drip. So once you've got it to that point, then it's ready to be glazed. Glazes are chemicals that are mixed in water. And you try to get them at a certain viscosity. So when you put them on the bisqueware, it will absorb the right amount of water and it'll make a skin with the dried chemicals. Goes into the firing once again. Only this time you'll be going up much higher. Bisque firing for me goes up to about 1,850 degrees.
Wow, that's hot.
That's hot. And then when I do my glaze firing, it's called a mid-range firing. I go up to about 2,200. You can go higher. You can go up to almost 2,400.
Wow.
With some of them, the high fires. So I'm electric, so mine's all enclosed into a case.
Okay.
A metal case and bricks, ceramic bricks inside of there. And then you have your electric coils. So the nice thing about that is my studio, I have it in my studio.
Okay.
And in the wintertime,
Ooh.
it's really nice and warm.
Nice and toasty.
Nice and toasty. So, yeah, I have to be careful because there are some toxic fumes at certain points.
Sure.
So one of the things I'll do is I'll have a fan going in one door and a fan that takes it up
Right, getting
the
that
backside.
bad air out. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right.
So then after that, I have to wait probably 24 to 26 hours to let it cool down. And with the electric firing that I do, it's a computerized kiln. And so I have certain ways that I ramp down the heat. And when you keep it at a certain temperature for a while, it does I call it's the little miracles of how the colors will change. So once you learn some of that, and it's not one of those things, it's not a once and done. It's a lifetime process. I've been doing this now, for 15 years, 16 years, because I took about a 24-year hiatus from doing clay, doing pottery.
Yeah, and I'm curious to learn more about that. Can you tell me about your break away from pottery and
Break
the
away
reason
from
why?
pottery. I was doing pottery down in Cannon Falls back in the early 80s, and I was working with a very well-known potter named Peter Leach, and he took on students. Well, he was the mentor basically, and I lived on his property for a 4 to 5 month period of the summer and into the fall, and I worked for him 12 hours a week to have access to the studio and a room and board, which was you could never do that again. Right. So. The nice thing about that is I was working on a daily basis with him, and I saw how he went through the whole process because that was his job. I mean, he did that full time. But the one thing I learned about doing a full-time job as an artist, your mind probably never stops, but you take those breaks that give you the energy to do something like that. And there's a certain certain system that you go through and a certain rhythm you get into for that whole process. Getting your clay ready, making your pots, and having a firing, and then you have a sale. And that goes on. And you have these periodically. But it's usually that same step, those 4 steps. So
Right.
it was nice that I learned how to do it with him.
Yeah.
But then after that, I decided to try some other things. And so stopped for a while, got married, had kids, and my wife had a job. I became the house husband, and I started doing a few other things. I started teaching my kids some of the things, not, it was just art. It was just being creative.
Sure.
And I was doing montage collage work for a while. And then I found a job loading cameras for photographers who were photographing marathons, Twin City Marathon. Found out they did graduation ceremonies as well. And so because I had a minor in photography, it was like right up my alley. And it was seasonal. So started photographing marathons and graduation ceremonies. And did that for 35 years. In fact, I still do some of the photography for graduation. Stopped doing it for marathons. I wore out my thumbs.
Oh, my.
With electronic cameras because of the vibrations. And going to a marathon, you shoot 6 hours straight, 20 to 25 images, 1,000 images.
That's a lot.
In a day.
Yeah.
And the vibrations wore out cartilage.
My goodness.
So I've had reconstructive surgery on both of my thumbs.
Oh, my.
And the nice thing about it is that it worked.
Good.
So
Yeah.
I don't throw really big pots. I try to keep it manageable. So 5 to 10 pounds of clay. I can make a casserole or I can make a pretty large pitcher or vase forms. But I'm strictly utilitarian. And then there are the art pieces that happen on the side.
Sure.
So
Nice.
But it keeps me busy.
It does.
Keeps me out of trouble. Keeps me home, which my wife likes.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's time for us to take a break. We will be right back.
If you're reaching for the moon with your video goals, but it's driving you bananas trying to get there, we can be your guiding star. Whether it be for marketing, storytelling, preserving memories, or just getting your message out there, Town Square Television's Production Services Department can help bring your ideas to life. For more information or to ask about a custom quote, you can visit townsquare.tv/production services.
Enhance. 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 Too much. Unenhance.
Guys, it doesn't have to be this hard. If you want to watch Town Square television programs, just go to townsquare.tv/streaming to find Town Square's community programs and your city or school board meetings. Or look for the Cablecast app on your smart device and search Town Square Television.
Stay up to date with what's happening at Town Square Television by signing up for our monthly newsletter. Go to our website, click on Newsletter Subscription, then fill in your details and submit.
Thank you for watching Town Square Talk. Did you know that Town Square Television is a 501c3 nonprofit organization? Yup, it's true. We are. And we rely on donations from wonderful viewers like you. You can also become a member, and you can do that at townsquare.tv. We would greatly appreciate your support to continue local programming. Thank you. We are back now with Joe Tromiczak from Bircher Hill Pottery. Joe, I'm really curious to hear the story behind how you started Bircher Hill Pottery, especially since you're located, in South St. Paul, which is a wonderful city.
Yes.
So, yeah, can you tell me about that?
Well, it started, I took about a 24-year hiatus from doing pottery. And at one point I said to my wife, I said, I'd really like to do pottery again. And she said to me, well, we have that one space down in the basement. You just have to clean it up. And so something she'd wanted cleaned up for a number of years. Well, it took me about 2-3 hours. I cleaned it up. And then I had connections with my friend Peter Leach, who knew someone who was getting rid of some equipment. So I got a new kiln, and then I got a potter's wheel. I made my own shelves for the clay, and then a table. And I would say within maybe a month to 6 weeks, I had already fired enough things to have a sale. So I had a sale in my house, and the other thing that I did was I posted a few pieces on Facebook. And within, I would say, a half hour of putting one of the mugs that I had made on there, I got a response from one of my classmates from college. Okay, so this is back in the 70s. And she said, "It's so neat to see that you're doing pottery again. You know, I still have that the mug that you sold me." So I said, "Well, you know, if you get around to it, could you post that?" Well, 5 minutes later, she posts the mug. And it's like, yeah, that's mine. And there's a difference in, you know, you do evolve in your style.
Sure.
And I asked her, I said, "Well, do you remember how much you paid for it?" And she said, "Yeah, you were selling them for $3. You know, I can't touch clay
Right.
to make a mug like that for less than $3. So things have changed. But it was really neat to see that. And so when I had my sale, a lot of people came out of the woodwork and bought pots. And for a year and a half, I said, you know, I'd really like to get a studio, have a studio. And so we had parameters, because I still had friends down in Cannon Falls area who were potters, and saw their happiness. They were doing, you know, what they thought was their bliss.
Right.
And I said, it's my turn. So I signed up, you know, on the internet with 4 or 5 different realtors, and they started sending me things daily. And my wife had certain parameters as far as how far we would go, because she was a nurse midwife, and she didn't want to move too far away from Regions Hospital where she was working. So Hastings was probably a little too far. Cannon Falls definitely wasn't. But I started seeing these things, you know, houses with big garages or extra spaces and things. And finally took her to work one time, and then went and looked at this one house in South St. Paul. And this is the house that was built by Civil War drummer boy William Bircher. He had it built for him in 1871. And we have an acre and almost a quarter of land. And there were 4 buildings on the property. The house, a 3-car garage, which was used by the gentleman who lived there. He was a picture framer. Blank space. And then another property or a building down on Concord Avenue that happened to be it was a grocery store or something like that at one point. Now it was just sort of a catch-all and fallen apart, and then a garage. And we called the realtor, and we just fell in love with it. And so there we were. But it took us a year and a half of me going through these daily to find the right place.
Right.
And we love it. We're just so happy with it. And it's a good sized property. It's probably one of the largest ones that's so close to downtown.
Yeah.
And we're on the street that we live on is Willis Avenue. And both sides are ravines. So it's dead ends on both sides, but it's right on Butler and off of Concord. Easy to get to.
Yeah, definitely.
Easy to get to. When we first moved there, and I was talking to them at City Hall about, well, what do I need to do as far as, because I wanted to have a gallery up there too. I thought, well, I've got to see what I have to do. And he said, well, you're mixed zoning. It's fine. You don't have to worry. He said, the only thing I wouldn't do is I wouldn't put in an auto parts shop because you have no parking for that many cars. So
So you were safe on that.
I was safe.
Yep.
Excuse me. But it's nice. I have 4 sales a year usually. And then I'm involved in two sales. One in Cannon Falls that I first did with Peter Leach, and another one in Prospect Park. And I've had some pieces at other places. I had them at the Black Sheep
Oh, yeah.
for
Great
a while.
coffee shop, yeah.
Great coffee shop.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I have a number of people that are repeat customers. So that's great.
That is great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Joe, can you tell me a little bit about what making things with your hands means to you, especially now that we're in such an increasingly digital world?
You know, I think it's just that I've been pretty lucky to have hands that are pretty coordinated.
Well, that helps.
You know,
yeah.
and that helps.
Yeah.
And, you know, now that I've been able to reconstruct them, it's wonderful. And I've always done things with my hands. So I'm not as good at two-dimensional as I am with three-dimensional. So one of the things that I really like doing is taking some of my tools and going ahead and putting designs on a lot of my pieces, the surface.
Okay.
I'll also do that with the glazes as well. Do a lot of landscape type of work with that. I'll do it as long as I can.
Sure.
You know, the rest of your body kind of starts wearing out, but I've always been creative. My kids are both creative. I have a son who's a painter and a musician. My daughter is a weaver and a baker. My wife, same thing. I mean, to be able to birth babies.
Yeah,
you
creativity running in the family.
Exactly.
I like it.
Exactly. So,
Nice. Well, as we kind of wrap up here,
Yeah.
Joe, can you tell if someone is interested in purchasing your pottery, how can they find it? Where can they get that from you?
you know, I have, like I said, I have 4 sales a year. I'll be having one at the end of May. And the nice thing is that my daughter's moving from North Carolina, where she's been a weaver and a baker, coming to St. Paul. She's going to live up here. And she's also going to be involved in the sale.
Okay, and where is the sale?
The sale is at our house.
Okay, got it.
1600 Willis Avenue.
Okay.
I usually put something on Facebook, either on Joe Tromiczak, or you can find it on Bircher Hill Pottery,
Okay.
which usually goes over to Instagram.
Sure.
And I usually put something on there about 2 weeks ahead of time.
Okay.
So if you see that,
And you have a website as well, right?
I do, but
Okay.
it's one of those things that I haven't done anything with for. It's like get around to it for 5 years.
Sure. So better
So-
to have people go to Facebook to find
yeah.
you? Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
So
Got it.
And then I'll probably put a sign up at the Black Sheep and
Sure.
a few around. So
Excellent. Great. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming in. Great
yeah.
to learn more about you and your pottery work. And
well, it's so nice to be here.
absolutely. Well,
Nice.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thank you all so much for watching this episode of Town Square Talk. I'm your host, Caleb Worth. We'll see you next time.